What makes this e-bike unlike anything else we've ever made before? Introducing our first ever dual drivetrain, full suspension electric bike, where XD power and durability meets full suspension performance and comfort.
Like to ride?
Kind of like riding a Velociraptor.
It's fast. It feels stable and controlled under bumps and rough sections.
Obviously, we have a lot of power under the hood, but that's not the only thing. This thing is extremely robust.
It feels predictable, like where your power is and what your suspension's doing.
Once you get off-road, things tend to get really bumpy in a hurry, and that's where we want this thing to go. So,
the FS-XD is an incredibly capable off-road powerhouse, ready to tackle even the toughest terrain. But this kind of performance doesn't just come to life overnight.
The original XD was all about packing maximum power and reliability into an e-bike, and we definitely accomplished that. With this bike, our mission was to take that foundation and refine it. Full suspension and improved drivetrain, torque sensing, dual batteries, and customizable gear ratios are just some of the highlights that we've been able to accomplish with the FS-XD. But it has not been easy. Our R&D team has worked for 2 years to make this bike a reality.
When we started trying to put the XD system onto our FS bike, we ran into a few different issues.
the chain was trying to go through the chainstay. The chain path was not clear. We clearly had to do something. We didn't really know how to solve the problem, so we just kind of started riding it. Our first couple swings at it were not acceptable. They were actually stopping the suspension of the bike from traveling through its full range, so it warranted a larger investigation altogether.
Now when the top side goes tight because it's below the pivot here, so it brings the bottom wheel down, so it's kind of pushing your bracket up when you pull the power.
The chain was quite a bit lower than the pivot point of the suspension. This ended up resulting in a super high anti-squat value, which meant that the bike felt very harsh when you were accelerating the motor.
As the motor power is being applied, we can appreciate there's tension within the chain. That approaches 500 to 1,000 pounds, depending what's happening in the motor. Now, 1,000 pounds pulling a bike frame together when it's trying to actuate in the center, it's actually going to lift the center of the bike up a little bit. So that's not allowing your suspension to travel as it needs to.
The chain forces when you were hitting the throttle were felt through the seat and through the suspension, and the rear end would stiffen up when you hit the throttle. So it ends up feeling kind of like a hardtail.
Well, unless you're some kind of fancy fandangled suspension scientist, specialized in kinematic design, you might be wondering, what are these guys talking about? Let's imagine for a second that I use the weight of this bike to simulate the force of a bump pressing up on the rear tire. The bump is pushed up on the rear tire, compressing the suspension. And that's good because it means your ride just got smoother. Problem is that if the chain is not centered on the pivot point of the suspension, then the power of the XD motor can pull on the suspension, like this. The force from the motor has now fully extended the suspension, and the suspension cannot absorb the pressure from the bump. That's not good. What is the point of having a full suspension bike that just turns into a hardtail every time you hit the throttle? Ooh, violent.
In order to fix it, we ended up adding an idler close to the pivot location of the bike. And this not only helped redirect the chain line, but also neutralizes the chain forces on the bike and allows the suspension kinematics to work as they should.
Okay, let's try this again. Only this time, I've got the chain up on the high pivot idler. Here we go, full throttle. And as you can see, with the chain rerouted, the motor doesn't have any leverage over the suspension system, so the suspension is left to do its job.
It absorbs bumps, it maintains traction going through rough sections, it feels stable when you apply power, and it also means that with the XD system, having a lot of power makes it a lot of fun.
This full suspension system is not the only improvement to the XD lineup. The team has also been working hard to refine the entire drivetrain.
Originally, we were targeting extremely long service intervals. Now, nothing has changed with that, but we realized there was maybe a few components that were overbuilt, let's say. We even heard from a few customers that there was a little extra drag in the system, that it was a little hard to pedal without the power being applied. So we put our heads together and decided that we should have a look at a more efficient chain.
The 219 chain featured on the original XD was kind of like bringing a bazooka to a bar fight. Let me explain. That chain could take 20x the force applied to it by the motor before it would break. That might sound great, but really, it's just overkill. So with refinement in mind, we've switched to the HL1 wide chain. It's lighter, more efficient, less prone to wear, and still 5 times stronger than it needs to be. That's plenty strong enough to uphold the XD name.
In comparison to the 219 chain, the half-length chain has standard bicycle pitch, so it's going to be easier to be able to replace this at a bike shop, and also be able to use standard chain tools like a chain brake that you would on your normal bike.
We won't see any reduction in reliability or an increase in need for service. All we're going to see is that we're going to have a much more efficient ride, and what it really translates to as the rider is that you're putting in less effort to go at a higher speed, climb your hills, all those things.
In addition to the new chain, we've also upgraded our sprockets. Induction hardened stainless steel in the front and hard anodized 7075 aluminum in the rear. The result is a smoother rolling, longer lasting drivetrain.
And we've also specifically chosen a tooth profile prescribed by ANSI, which allows longer running of the chains and less sprocket wear and chain wear. So this thing is pretty much bomb-proof. We should see no problem, a significant life cycle out of this drive system. These issues were extremely important for us to solve because Biktrix as a brand sells good products, and we have certainly a reputation to uphold. So it wasn't going to be a quick overnight job to get it on the road. We had to put some serious thought into this.
We wanted to make a bike that was reliable and fun for the end user, and something that we're stoked to ride and have fun on the trails. So yeah, we kept refining it till we were happy with the product we had.